I'm Jon.
I'm Kymia.
We're super excited to have Kymia here with us today. Kymia Nawabi is an artist. She currently lives in Brooklyn, New York, but she also studied art in a couple of different places. She did her undergraduate degree at Eastern Carolina University, graduated in 2003 with BFA in drawing and painting, and then went on and did her master's at the University of Florida down in Gainesville, and graduated there with an MFA in drawing and painting in 2006. Since then, she's had some exciting things that happened in her career. She's shown at some great museum shows, had a show at the Brooklyn Museum, Museum at Davidson College, and a few other really exciting things, Queens Museum too. Yeah. So we're just really excited to have this show here. It's something I've actually been thinking about for 4 years, back to when I sent you that email a few years ago. But so, yes, here's Kymia. So like I said, we're just going to keep it informal, and we're going to kind of pretend like we're having a private conversation, but everybody's just kind of listening in. So, Kymia.
Hi.
Hey. Were you always interested in art?
Yeah. As long as I can remember, going things back as far as like elementary school and like middle school.
Can you guys hear?
Maybe I should talk to you guys too. As long as I can remember, I've been always interested in being a visual person and making drawings, especially, and paintings and sculpture. And I just at a very young age realized that it was the easiest mode of communication for me. I'm not a very verbal person, and I'm not a good writer. I have a lot of things I like to speak about and say, but visually working with visuals is the easiest way for me to get it all out. And at a young age, I realized I had a lot to say about what was going on with me personally through like my life story. I had a lot of anxiety growing up and a lot of social anxiety disorder in particular, and I just found that I kept writing about it in my diaries, but I was actually drawing about it even more, and I started to like realize that I was describing things a lot in metaphor and symbolism at a very young age. And when I started looking to like different movies that we were watching growing up, and like cartoons even and things, I just started realizing that these mythologies people were creating, it was like the exact same way that I was speaking. They just created these huge worlds out of it that I wanted to do. I wanted to do that also. So yeah.
So like when you're a little girl, would you say I want to be an artist when I grow up, or was there something else ever there?
I don't think that there was anything else really ever there. I mean, I had other ridiculous dreams, like I always wanted to be a singer and things like that, but that can't do it.
Come on, here's your chance.
You guys have leaned very quickly. But I knew that I wanted to be an artist just because it came so naturally to me. It was just something I was always doing anyways. And it wasn't anything that was like forced. I just found myself just doing it on like a day-to-day basis and ruining my mom's carpets, and I caught her bed on fire once trying to do it.
This lovely lady is responsible.
So, I was definitely just trying to like get things to like move along and learn different techniques and things like that. But yeah, I was working in EMS at a very young age. So.
Was there ever like one of those aha moments like, hey, maybe I could do this for a career?
Yeah. I was in 7th grade and I sold my first piece actually to my science teacher. I think it was Mr. Gardner. I don't remember his first name, but it was a scratch board of a feather. And so like I was already using like birds in my work at a young age and stuff like that. But I just remember he came to me and wanted to buy it, and I was like, of course. And then so I don't know, I thought that was amazing. I like made something and someone purchased it, and like
Do you remember what that first painting sold for?
I don't, but I think I even like kept a check in one of my diaries. I'm not lying. So, but I made something up. That's all that mattered. I was like, yes, someone wanted something of mine.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so at a very young age.
So were there other artists in the family, or how did you get exposed?
I have a feeling it is a little hereditary because my sister can draw really well also, and she was actually doing like a lot of fashion design at a younger age, and for fun. I mean, not serious, but and then she actually attended the School of the Arts in Greensboro, right? Winston-Salem. And but going even far back, like my mom and my dad was an amazing draftsman. I just loved watching him draw, and I'm not gonna lie, he helped me do a few art projects when we were in school, we were younger age and stuff, but my mom would always be really good at drawing too. So I think part of it's hereditary, but I don't know, even if like I didn't know all that, I still feel like I would have found it along the way somehow. Yeah.
Do you still draw and paint or anything?
No,
No, I don't have time for that now. When I retire, I will.
All right. Yeah, at some point. So now Kymia lives in Brooklyn, New York, but you've lived in a number of other places over the years. North Carolina. Where were you born?
I was born in San Diego, actually, in California, and then we moved at a really young age. I was like maybe 5 or 6 or something, and then we went to Durham, North Carolina first, and I grew up there, and then I went to college in Greenville, North Carolina, and then grad school in Gainesville, Florida, and then I worked my way up to New York.
And how long have you been in New York now?
Since 2006.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been a while. I'm tired of it.
Looking for somewhere.
Yeah, we're not going to leave probably anytime soon, but now that I'm in Seattle, I don't know. When you see other cities, you get kind of charmed very easily. It's just, New York is very expensive, and I don't know.
This is Kymia's first time out there.
Yeah, I love it. It's so beautiful. That's beautiful. So I don't know, you get a little bit starry-eyed when you see these sorts of things. You're like, oh my God, it's so gorgeous, and I just want to stay.
So have you found, like, living in some different places, has that affected the work you've made? Have you been affected by the environment of those places?
I want to say no, just because the work is always so, it's always so much about introspection and these like giant themes of like life and death, and I think that environment may have gotten its way in there a little bit when we were kind of hiding out in Devin's parents' place for a little while when we were trying to scrounge up money for rent at one point, and we were stuck in a really small space in the living room, and Devin claims that he thinks that it kind of found its way into the work, but other than that, you know.
Devin, you care to elaborate on that?
Yeah, it was a little
Devin is Kymia's husband.
Oh yeah, that's my husband, Devin.
It was a pretty claustrophobic environment. We're living like sectioned off into the living room, and I think this is how this piece manifested.
I love it.
Frightening, but you know.
But other than that, definitely, like it's not like where I am that like guides the work. It's always like where I am inside that guides the work.
There's definitely a lot going on inside. Plenty of material.
A lot, yeah.
So the body of the work that you created for this show, it seems like it's kind of in line of the work that you were working on for your solo show at the Brooklyn Museum back in 2011.
Definitely.
So where are these ideas coming from?
So I guess just
or where did it start even back?
Exactly, yeah. To take you guys back to what the show, Not For Long, My Forlorn, was the exhibition I had at the Brooklyn Museum. And when I had the opportunity to create that body of work, I knew that there was something I wasn't finished talking about yet that I had started making before I was interrupted for a few months with something else that happened. And that body work, or that work was based on ideas of rebirth and life and death, mainly because, like I said, growing up with anxiety and all these sorts of things, you always think you're dying. It's just such an awful feeling, and you just don't know what's going on with your insides and in your mind. And so I had just a really major fear of death growing up, unfortunately. But then my father passed away at a young age, and so I think that definitely didn't help, and it, sparked a lot of new questions. And so I think having that, like going into the work like in 2010, I think it was. I had to put it on pause for a minute, and then when I finally had the chance to make Not For Long, My Forlorn, I wanted to revisit all those themes, and all this stuff just like started coming out. Like it was so strange. I started doing more research on alchemy and Greek and Egyptian mythology, and like finding out that like I just had this sort of aha moment, like as you call it, like that I didn't grow up with religion or spirituality or like faith in any way, and I wanted to have something that I could sort of cling to myself. And in some way, I think I was always a little jealous of the people in Durham. There was a lot of, religious people that I went to school with. And I think on some level I was always a little jealous because they seemed like they had like an answer to like what happens after you pass on and what this all means. And, so I kind of rebelled against all that, and I was like, well, I don't believe in everything that they believe in, but I do want to believe in something. So I've been doing all this research on like different religions from around the world and different cultures, belief systems on their burial ceremonies, and I just have been like kind of picking and choosing what I like to believe in, and then making up my own ideas of spirituality to believe in. And that's where that show came from. It's like, taking different Egyptian gods and Greek mythological creatures and then adopting their meanings to be like part of my own. Yeah. Was
this like a long history you had with studying these subjects, or is this something that you started exploring, looking for the answers?
I think that was definitely the first moment that I started sort of looking into those things, because before that it was all introspection. It was all just, this is how I feel, this is what it feels like, and this is how I'm creating the symbols and the metaphors for all that. But then when I started thinking about in the bigger picture for like all of us, not just about me, and like where do we go and what happens to us when you're buried or you're cremated and all these different things, and And I just realized that there's so many ancient cultures and like histories that have so many answers to those ideas, and I really like the way that they think, and we don't necessarily have that in contemporary culture, especially in the US perhaps. Like, then you don't grow up with it. It's kind of like not there. So I had to search for it a little bit.
I always thought it's interesting how so many people in so many parts of the world kind of independently came to very similar ideas or conclusions about what happens to us,
Yeah.
or where we
Some
come
of it
from.
overlaps, and
Yeah,
it doesn't necessarily have to be like the same exact symbols or characters or whatever it's that they believe in, but the ideas are there, like the idea of rebirth and reformation, and the spirit and the soul carrying on, and then the body just sort of being like the shell of us, and energies being passed back and forth and things like that. Like that definitely overlaps throughout different cultures.
So does making, oh yeah, please.
Well, I was just wondering if you have any favorite mythologists or books that you like that you've done through research.
The Secret History of the World by Mark Booth. It's like one of the ones I kept reading into. Like I don't read books like from beginning to end. I have such a short attention span. I have to just sort of like go from section to section and come back to things. And my memory's terrible. So like I'll read a sentence and not even remember what I just got or out of it. So I've been like looking into that book for a long time now, and I keep finding it to be like perfect for me. But that's like my number one. And I've just been having lots of random readings on like alchemy. But yeah.
So does making your work, is it like cathartic, a therapeutic experience for you?
100%, yes. Like I said, even since I was like little, I found that even if I was just like drawing in my diary about what it is that I was going through, I like immediately would feel better. Like it was just like the biggest release. But for me, the thing that's like been very present from the beginning up until now is that it just kind of gives me this confidence to like put myself out there and put myself in front of people in the world, because it's a scary thing to like share your personal life with people, especially like ideas that you don't know they might be taboo or things that people don't normally talk about or address from day-to-day life. Conversation can be kind of surfacey, but these are really big topics, and I think that it makes me more brave to like be able to put it forth and out here.
Do you usually find yourself being drawn to create or make the work when you're in a particular mood, or is it just happen like at a certain time of the day? I mean, when do you work?
Well, these days it's taken on a different process for sure, because it's not really my job.
Yeah.
I would normally, before it became like there was deadlines, I was just drawing every day, and like, you were just doing it without a lot of stress, and it was a lot of more, maybe not free associativeness happening, but like just like you felt more like at ease, just kind of having mistakes happen more often and things like that, and the bad work happening more often. Whereas now I'm making work probably still every day, but that doesn't mean I'm like able to experiment maybe as like freely as like I used to.
Yeah, this nasty gallery's giving you
I
deadlines.
know. Good stuff. But yeah, I think I've been in deep practice for a very long time. But like, obviously you have to give yourself a break sometimes, otherwise you really burn out. And yeah, so I take breaks sometimes, but most of the time I'm like, at least, if it's not a few hours like in the studio a day, definitely when I'm on deadline, like Devin knows I was in the studio for like 12-hour days, and then you just keep going and going. But yeah, I definitely in the studio every day.
Since you make your work about your anxiety, do you feel like you have a line that you like, sometimes it gets too personal and you won't show it, or
Yeah.
do you just put it all
I
out?
share everything, but I do have to admit the earlier works, like especially back in college, I think that it was a lot harder for the audience to enter, just because I've revisited self-portraiture with this body work in particular, but I was doing a lot more, it was a lot darker than this work. It was a lot of what my graduate committee called very angsty work, and I didn't want that to be the way that it was being perceived, so I had to change it up a little bit. But I think that it's transformed into a way that like I don't have to feel uncomfortable anymore about presenting it to the audience, and that like it's too much. I don't feel like it's ever too much. And we even had this conversation before the show went up, where you were like, it's darker work, but it's like, wow, if you'd only seen what I was making before, this is like nothing. Yeah.
Well, I think the darker though, it's I think a lot of artists feel that they need to only make things that are pretty, or only make things that they feel the collectors are going to purchase, you know, and I think it's so important to
But there's
express.
so much beauty in darkness. Like, you know, that's why I find that, like, that's what I was doing, especially in graduate school when I was heavily making work about the social anxiety disorder, that I had finally, like, I had harnessed it. And I don't know, I think that, I just lost my train of thought, I'm sorry.
Social anxiety.
Yeah, and I think that once you, I totally lost my train of thought.
That's
Sorry.
I'd like to know, when you were talking about being brave and sharing what was
Yeah.
coming, I'm interested in knowing, once you have created your work, do you go back and you actually see it differently? Does it speak to you differently after you've already put it out there?
I mean, not so much, only because I feel like I'm so specific about it, like what it is that I want to say.
Right.
And I already have been sketching so much about it, and I know what it is, like what the symbols are trying to say, and like what the metaphors are and stuff. But I do find that when I start writing about the work, like when I was sharing blurbs with you guys about each piece, that sometimes I do have moments where I'm like, oh my god, I didn't see that connection with like one character to another or one symbol to another, and then I'm like kind of, I get surprised, and that's really exciting. But most of the time I'm like, I know exactly what each thing means and how it all connects. But there are some nice surprises in there sometimes.
Yeah, Kymia did give us very extensive, you know, write-ups about each one of these pieces. Each one tells a story, or each one has an allegorical lesson or something that's being transmitted. So there's narratives definitely going within these works. So after the talk, if you have specific questions, or even now, I mean, do you have any questions? Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about the abject thing? What you mean when you say it?
Yeah. So that's actually what I wrote part of my thesis was on
Take a
that.
picture.
Okay. So I did a lot of research on Julia Kristeva's theory of the abject for my thesis, and this idea of kind of like what borderlines on like just like gruesome and horrible, and then like, you know, how it's all taboo and that we don't really speak about these things, like I was saying. So I feel like when speaking of death, which is, it's very straightforward, that's what I'm speaking of, it's like not something that is easily discussed. And so for me, when I'm putting the human characters in each work, and whether it's a self-portrait or not, I'm trying to really make a portrait of humanity in a lot of the work, I'm trying to discuss that we are the abject human, and that it's maybe a little bit, it's more specific to us being these, you know, essentially we go through decay and hopefully regrowth is my idea. But when I was speaking of the abject human during that body of work with the Nincompoop series when I was in graduate school, I was speaking more about the malfunctions my body was going through when I was experiencing severe anxiety disorder, and my body just lost control, and I went through a lot of weird stuff as a human being, and it didn't make any sense. Like I literally felt like I had reverted back to being like a baby, and my mother helped me through some really weird times and stuff. And so speaking of the abject, I was more specific to that body of work, but I still think that it pertains to what I'm making now, because I'm speaking of some pretty like weird, like human experience stuff.
Real.
Yeah. Real stuff that we don't know answers to. So that's like why I feel like there's no concrete answers to anything that it is that I'm speaking of, but like I just want to believe what it is that I've brought up in the work with my like research, and thinking that maybe it could be true, and that I'm not trying to be preachy about any of it, but that like, maybe it's something I would like to believe that it could come true.
So it's, in this essence, all this experience of all these studies and making the work, it's completely changed the way you see the world in general?
Yeah.
Or has it gotten that far, or are you still exploring?
I mean,
Still...
it's so new that like it's not like I'm not like 100% convinced that it is true, but I like to believe that some of these, like for example, like if you are cremated, that you come back and that you are that you're reincarnated, and I'd like to believe that that's true, but like I feel like I'm so young, and I also like to say that I think that I'm such a brand new soul in the world. I feel brand new. I mean, my husband's like so calm. I think that he's an old soul, and I think we talk about it often. That like I'm such an anxious person. I'm really nervous. I'm always like thinking of the future so much, and like I just can't be in the moment. I feel like it's just because I feel so inexperienced with what we are all going through, and so I think that I'm so. I don't know if it's affected my view of the world, but I'm definitely like more curious, if anything. That I feel like there's more out there than I was aware of.
It's opened up a whole other
Yeah.
can of worms.
Yeah.
I
Obviously, like I see a lot of like depth and intention in your work, but I'm wondering like if somebody came to you with like an alternative interpretation of your
Yeah.
work, would you correct them, or do you consider like each personal interpretation like as
I
valid
would love
as
to
your
consider,
intentions?
yeah, I'd love to consider what people get out of the work, because I think that that would be such a terrible thing to do, shut someone down when they like have gotten something out of the work, because I think we each bring our own experiences to what it is that we're looking at. And so whatever you've experienced in your life or whatever, you may be decoding what I have shown you in a totally different way than what I've experienced and how I'm, thinking things represent themselves. So if you were to tell me that you break it down in a different way, I would not want to say that. Well, that's amazing, but for me, this is what it meant. So that's really interesting that it maybe overlaps in this way, or that it doesn't at all. Like, I'd be more conversational about it and like appreciate what it is that you got out of it versus being like, that's dead wrong. Like, I would never say that. I would never say that.
Yeah, Kymia is pretty open about talking about the work. We have some artists who you try to talk about
Oh,
the work.
really?
Oh yeah, and they won't tell you anything because they say, well, once the work leaves the studio, what I said doesn't matter. And that's just their way of not having to talk about
Oh, no.
it. So there's always that card.
Yeah, I could
to
go
play.
on and on. This is a problem, actually. It's not too much. Now like me, that's some mystery behind.
So a couple minutes ago, you mentioned the words thinking about the future, which are words that we see recurring over and over. The
Right.
future. And
Yeah.
every one of these newer paintings that you made for the show, 13 of the 16 paintings in the show, somewhere in there has the words the future. Can you talk a little bit more about what that's about?
Absolutely. Around 2011, I got kind of stuck with my work. I was making a lot of bad work. And I basically thought that, okay, that's it. I'm not going to be able to make anything good ever again. Maybe I should just stop.
Hold on. What's bad work mean for you?
Really bad work. Like, I mean, it was just like, it wasn't coming together. Things seemed kind of forced in a way. Like, the drawing just wasn't coming together as nicely as I wanted it to. And I was experimenting with some printmaking because I got into a residency, and I hadn't revisited that process in years. And I mean, it was time to make some mistakes, honestly, because I'd hit this plateau, this high point, and I think I got in a little bit of plateau. And then I remembered something that like my instructors had told me when I was in undergrad and graduate school, actually. And I couldn't believe that, like, I didn't think of it sooner, but they basically said that if you really find yourself getting stuck, the best thing to do is to give yourself, some parameters to work within. Like, actually challenge yourself to do, maybe just use X, Y, and Z for either color or concept or whatever. So I told myself, well, okay, I'm going to give myself one rule. I have to use the words of the future in every single piece that I make for a while and just see what that does. And so, I hadn't used text in my work really ever before. In fact, I kind of get turned off when I see it in work. Yeah.
What is the relevance of the future?
Okay.
For you.
Yeah. So I think it's just because I'm so obsessed with the future, and that I knew that's how it kind of came up, where I was like, I need to use the words, because like I kept, when I was writing in my diaries, like I would just keep talking about the future over and over again. And I mean, and not just about death, but like just about it in general, about everything. I can't just stop thinking about it all the time. And I realized that, like, okay, if I'm obsessing about it, and that's like what I've always made my work about, is like what my obsessions are and like what I can't stop thinking about and what's troubling me, then why don't I just literally put the words in the work and see what it can do for design and for concept and for, maybe how the composition moves. And I just wanted to use it as a challenge, but really it's just being as straightforward as that I couldn't stop using the words in my writings to myself, and I would find myself just having them in my head so often. I was like, maybe if I just get it out somehow, it'll maybe stop, which is like, how the previous bodies of work that I made have functioned. Like, I got out the mythologies, like with all the characters and the landscapes and their functions and their meanings, and I think they've kind of laid to rest for a while in a nice way. So maybe this will find its way to shut up in a while too,
It seems like around where you're using the future, at least in these two, there's like these sparkly things.
Mm-hmm.
Is that like, are those connected intentionally?
You mean the text, the future, and then the
And
glitter?
The brighting, yeah.
Yeah, because I think when I'm thinking of the future, I can't help but, and I hope it doesn't come out cheesy, but I can't help but start thinking about like I'm thinking about microcosm and macrocosm, like, us being actually so tiny in something so big. And I think we're not as connected to like you know, the cosmos or maybe nature as we once were, maybe as a people. But like, I just think that when I'm thinking about the future, I can't help but start thinking about like outer space and like the cosmos and the gods, if there are any, or goddesses, and like whatever's out there. Like, I just think that I start thinking about this starry world, and that we're actually connected to something much more like powerful and like and not anything religious or like preachy, and just like something
Seeking out
kind
the
of
mystery or
yeah, something otherworldly. And I think that whenever I've watched, like I said, like cartoons growing up or other movies that I love so much that deal with such fantastical ideas and like sci-fi stuff, you always like see the, you know, I think something about the sparkliness and like the glitter and magic of all that. I just think I had to like include it in the work to relate to that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah. Thanks.
Do you still do diaries?
Do I still do diaries? Yes. Not as intensely as I used to. I mean, oh my God, I have a box full of like jam-packed books. Like I collect a lot of different things from like, I don't know, different letters from people that I've gotten, or tidbits from just life in general and stuff. But these things from college are just like they're bursting at the seams. And I think that now, again, like unfortunately, life has gotten busy, and it's just hard to kind of sometimes just sit down and be quiet and kind of have that moment writing. But it's happening more in the sketchbooks now than it is in just diaries. So it's kind of interesting.
You mentioned college and a couple of professors along the way. Was there any professor or anybody in particular who came along and really influenced, or was a mentor for you, or affected?
There are three that were huge for me. Professor Paul Hartley from ECU. He passed away, unfortunately, but he was like my #1 mentor in college. And then in grad school, there is Richard Hype and Arnold Meshes, who were like my like stars. Like, I couldn't have done it without them. But they're the ones that, like, when I came into grad school, were like, you are terrible. Like, in that way where they're like, you keep doing this, you keep doing that, but like you need to start from scratch and like invent new ways to talk about you. And they broke me down and then built me back up. And I feel like I owe this kind of work to them big time. So yeah.
That reminds me, we have a postcard from her.
Yeah, he sent me a postcard
That came
here.
to
He's
the
like
gallery.
98 years old or something and still making art like a crazy person. He's amazing. Yeah, so it means a lot to me that he, you know, pumps me up. Yeah.
I've heard you speak a lot about dreams, and how maybe speak about how dreams inform titles or subject matter for you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to connect that to something else too. Someone else, like, in another one of the talks I did, asked, like, if I, like, okay, you're talking about all these ghosts and souls and spirits and stuff, but, like, do you actually believe in that kind of thing? Or have you met any or anything like that? And I said, well, yes. And then the audience was like, oh, like, okay, she's kind of cuckoo. And I was like, no, and I said, it's in my dreams. Like, I've seen my father in my dreams, like, countless times, and the interaction is always very similar, and I think that means something. And you know, that goes into the work and in a lot of ways. And I think that, you know, in my dream world, things tend to align a lot more closely with what's happening in my work than it does with what's happening in the real world. So, and you know, just the internal world aligning so much closer with the dream world. And so for me, it's such a strong place to be. I take my dreams like seriously. Like I literally wake up and bother him like right away. Like I dreamt that I was like flying over this thing or whatever, and then he's like, okay, can I wake up first, please? But like I actually really, I take them. I think that they mean something, and I think that they inform the work quite a bit. It's just something maybe that's a little bit more internal, that like doesn't have to be so obvious, and like I could just sort of touch on little things here and there.
Why don't we jump into talking about a little more specifically, like what's happening in some of these
Yeah.
paintings. You know, can you talk a little bit more about the iconography you've developed and some of the symbols that you're using and where they're coming from, or even not even where they're coming from? I guess is less important is what they mean for you.
Sure. So for me, like it's obvious, like I said, I've worked very heavily within symbolism and metaphor in the work, and with this piece in particular, Guardian of the Divine, I got really excited about the griffin mythological beast, and he's got the head and the front legs of the eagle, and then the body and tail and back legs of a lion. Sometimes he's depicted actually of having a tail of a snake, which I wanted to not overuse the snake, so I kind of edited that out. And the eagle is seen as the king of all birds, and the lion is seen as the king of all beasts. And I thought, well, God, what a powerful character, because you're bringing these two kings together and like making this like amazing creature out of it. And the griffin is believed to be the guardian of the divine and a protector. And I think it's kind of interesting to look at like something that has like these crazy claws and these really sharp beaks and these very telling eyes, and thinking of it as your protector, even though it looks so scary, kind of seems so appropriate because it's something so large and intimidating, which I think parallels the idea of something like God or the cosmos and things like that. So here he's protecting actually this figure down here, a more concealed self-portrait, and she's bowing down, but also she's sort of in the shape of a ball. And the way that she's formed into the shape of the ball is supposed to relate very closely to the dung beetle scarab character, which I discovered was in Egyptian mythology. And the ancient Egyptians really hold the scarab very, to be such a sacred creature to them. Mainly because they believed that it seemed like it was a asexual being, like it was creating itself out of nothing. Because their roles are so confusing when they're reproducing. But the dung beetle, how it rolls the dung along, and I wanted it to touch on that instead of obviously a ball of that going along, it's actually her, and that there be something created within her that seems like it's out of nothing, almost like alchemy. And they're sort of having this moment of communication, but you don't know quite what it is, like where maybe this is the servant and this is the overseer, and that they're both in the progress, like her recreation is in progress, and that they're overseeing it and making sure that it's clear from all evil or harm. And I love the idea of staying with the insect of the beetle, so I chose the harlequin beetle to create this crest at the top of the composition to sort of, I don't know, punctuate what it is that's happening here, and like it makes it almost look like it's a very real thing that's going down. And the harlequin beetle usually has these markings on its back that are just so weird and beautiful, and I actually like removed the markings and I replaced it with the words "the future," and it's mirrored on either side of its wings. I love how they kind of join hands and come together in this circle form that's supposed to echo what's happening down here, but also they turn into like a star. So it's like mimicking what's happening with the little glitter stars that are put throughout the piece. Yeah.
Good job.
Thanks. Sure.
I'm really curious about just like even the physical process of making this.
Yeah.
Like how often do you like sketch your ideas before putting them down, or like is there any times where you take a break between like making the master work and putting making your ideas more concrete before continuing?
Yes, for sure. I go back and forth in the book quite a bit, and I started with this sketch for this piece, and I got really excited because I mean, like I said, I started with discovering the griffin and like getting really excited about what he symbolized, and then I started to do the research on the harlequin beetle, and then I started to just take his regular back and then start to Photoshop my own words in just to see what it would look like, and then I translate it into the work. So I go back and forth quite a bit between the sketchbook and the actual piece. But once I get the work sketched out and like drawn on, I start inking, and then I like just get lost. Like I just literally like get into a zone, and then I just keep going and going and going. Yeah.
So I mean, how much generally is it planned? Yeah, or how much is happening kind of along the way?
Quite a bit actually, because what will happen is I'll start thinking about body language quite a bit within the works, because I really love the way that the creatures and characters like actually interact with one another. And so I will start taking shots of myself in different positions that I think conceptually will make sense with what's happening in the work. And so I think I took a break at one point and then started taking the studio shots of like myself in these different positions, and then integrated it into how she'd be sitting with the griffin. But then I started sketching that out. So there's some back and forth, but like not a ton, because again, you're limited with time, and then you know what it is that you know what interactions you want to go down, but just getting in the right way. Like I literally had her, something as small as like her foot was facing the other way, and then I took another photo and then just collaged it in a different way so that it would, it's silly, maybe other people don't notice it, but I wanted it to mimic the idea of like a bird face, like the beak and then the eye, but that's stuff that no one else maybe sees, and I just get really excited about it.
The more time you spend with it, the closer you look, the more things that are gonna pop out at you.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's great.
I'm sorry if you've already mentioned this and
No.
I missed it, but I don't know how often I see a two-headed griffin.
I made it up.
Okay.
Yeah, sometimes. I'm not gonna, because in my research I found a two-headed snake and I loved it so much. I was like, I'm gonna make a two-headed griffin, and I got really excited about it. I discovered the harpy eagle because I didn't want it to just be any kind of eagle, and I loved the way that they looked, and so I didn't want them to both be the exact same kind. But sometimes things aren't all conceptual. It's also just for visual reasons that I'm like, that's just gonna look really beautiful. And I love things repeating themselves sometimes in the work. So I just made them doubly as fantastical. Yeah, I hope that's okay. Yeah.
What about, so the title of the show, you picked the word Soothsayer.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about where that comes from?
Sure. I was really racking my brain over what we're going to call this, and I was again doing my research on oracles and mystic beings, and then I found the word Soothsayer, and I found out the meaning, and I just went berserk. I was like, that is perfect. The breakdown of the word for me is like also like a play on words. So sooth in Old English meant to bring forth the truth, and in current meaning with sooth it means to calm and to make feel better. And, right? And so Soothsayer is someone who claims to be able to foretell the future. And I love the idea of it also being soothing, something that's like reassuring and calming. And for me, like all the pieces are like little self-affirmations, like for the rest of my life. Like I want to feel like I'm having these positive like reminders of what could be and what I want to be, that's going to happen. And so I decided Soothsayer was like a perfect title for the works because I'm talking so much about the future. I want to claim to be someone that can predict it.
Right, as well as at the same time you're making this work that's therapeutic.
Yes, exactly. For myself and hopefully for others. That's the idea. Yeah.
So because of that meaning for you, and because the words the future are repeated, in my mind when I think of the future, I think of life in the future. But so do you feel like your work now is less dark and a little bit more hopeful about the future rather than just thinking of death?
Yeah, because I think that's the difference between my older works and this work. I think I've always been talking about the future, honestly. And so I think that when I was speaking about death in such a like gory, dark way, and now I'm actually speaking about the more spiritual side of it. And seeing it as something that doesn't have to be terrifying and like something that we all share and like experience and stuff. Like I just think that now there's literally more positive imagery being used. Like these mythological beasts and things like that, I hope don't come across as like, scary characters, but as like just powerful ones that actually have like a positive message. And even within the snakes, like the Ouroboros, that's a positive character. So even though maybe I still have some darkness there, it's actually meant to, exist on that dual level, but like really, really meant to be positive. So yeah, I think I'm using it in a more less scary, dark way.
I love how you capture the dream world, and that starts to explain to me why it can be so present for such a long time with your work, and literally have this internal conversation with me, with your work, and because it's the dream world. So I get that. I really understand and appreciate that. The other thing that I'm struck by is how we decide what's dark.
Yeah.
I mean, who decides that anyway? I mean,
I don't know. Actually,
it's
like,
interesting.
Is it feeling, or
who decides what's dark? I'm interested in knowing I also love how you talk about mistakes.
Yeah.
That's innovation. That's
yeah,
where
yeah,
it's
yeah.
on the
I mean,
tip,
that's
right?
where the good stuff comes.
That's how it goes.
Yeah.
I'm interested in any of the work in here. Is there a mistake in disguise?
If there was one, it got covered up. Like, I'm not gonna, and then like you said, it's innovation because it sparked another part of the process that I didn't know existed before. So I'm not gonna lie, I don't know if I told you one. One of them got scratched along the way in my process. As you see, there's a lot of white of the paper left, right?
Right.
And one of them got scratched, and it was not meant to have much going on around. You're looking nervous now. and then me and Devin were like looking at it together, and I was like, oh my god, I don't know what to do. It ruined it, and then like I calmed down for a minute, and then I literally took some glue, archival glue, and some water, and like I watered down a little bit. I took my paintbrush, like did a little streak across it, and then put some glitter on top. And then it's like this little accent in the sky. And then I was like, oh yeah, like it's like a little spark off of what just exploded. And like, so I just freaked out for a minute. And then I realized like, even if there's like a mess up, like it can actually just integrate itself back into composition and it's fine. But like the older work I was talking about that were all mistakes, they were just ugly. They were bad. Like they just looked really bad. And I just felt that they weren't as poetic and like well drawn and stuff. And in those cases, those can't be saved maybe. Who knows? I just, you can't work something to death. So, yeah.
Do you keep any of the old ones, the garbage?
No, I never throw anything away. I have portfolios filled with like the B-sides, and then like and then the good stuff gets to surface, So that's good. But I think that it's, even though maybe there are mistakes, there are a few that I'm like actually crazy about, and I even went ahead and framed one. And it's huge, and some other people were just like not having it, so I was like, well, whatever, I'm keeping it, it's fine, But like, those things could resurface years later and be considered like masterpieces for all I know. But like, they just haven't been critiqued in the most awesome way. So.
The narrative stories that you're telling, I don't know how much of those you share with each piece. Will you tell us another story?
Yeah, I'll tell you
Should we
another
talk
story.
about
You
this
wanna
one
talk about-
or Soothsayer, whichever one you
I can talk about which one do you want to
I
hear
don't
about?
care.
Okay. You want to talk about this one a little bit?
Yeah, let's-
Sure. So this one is titled Before the Oracles. And this one I was really excited about because I got to use birds in the work, which are my spirit animal. And I discovered ravens in Greek mythology being very closely associated with the god of prophecy, Apollo. And Apollo like rides his chariot in the sky to like pave the way for the sun, and I just thought that was just beautiful. And then the raven is actually his talisman and like his messenger from the gods to the mortal world. And they're seen as mystic beings actually within a lot of northeastern Native American tribes. And
Northwest too, out here.
Yeah,
big
really?
Ravens are huge. Yeah, we can talk about that.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And they're seen as bringers of light. And the duality of it. I love that they're also seen as ill omens and evil beings because of their like harsh call and their diet on the dead. And for that reason, they're actually able to speak to the souls of the departed. And there's just so much poetic meaning behind the raven. I was like, I'm taking it, I'm using it. So they're attached to these cloaked figures, these mystic beings that are floating in the sky, covered in these like starry cloaks. And
when you look at it close, you actually see that the ravens are just helmets they're wearing. They're actually little veils.
They're like headgear, like ceremonial headgear or something. But the one on the far left of the four is actually a little animated. And I like to think that they're actually alive, even though it's just the head, and maybe they become part of that weird being. And maybe it's like the gods and the ravens have become one, actually, and that they're like fused together, and then this is what comes forth to like tell this woman her future. And in the title, I love how before the oracles means maybe in front of the oracles this ceremonial thing is happening, or perhaps she already knows her fate before they even tell it to her, before they confess it. And so you'll see the woman the woman being pushed almost over the cliff, and over like whatever she's walking over, the striations in the bedrock, actually the words the future surface. And I just like how almost like it's this weird message that even like the earth is starting to erupt for her or something, and it's just like surrounding her. And so as she's being pushed over, the symbol of divine creation is floating in front of her, and I just feel like it's either like some sort of weird guiding light, because to me it seems like electric or something. So it seems like a guiding light or like a guiding force, and then the person behind her is kind of ambiguous. You don't know who he is, and he's this dark character. Is he good or bad? And he almost seems to be whispering something in her ear, so you don't really know what he's saying. Is it good or bad? I just think it's so interesting that he looks like he's pushing her, but she's also opening, like she's open, like she's not fighting it. So maybe perhaps she's like she's in total trust of this whole experience. Overall, I'm really trying to speak to the initiation ceremonies that Freemasons experience within Masonic lodges, and how they'll assimilate these events that could normally cause death, like being pushed over a cliff, or like, you know, some of them were tied up on ropes and then dropped down and things like that. And it's supposed to kickstart this feeling of the soul leaving the body, to kind of give you existential knowledge of what that is like, you know, with like the spirit leaving the body, and what that's like, so that you're prepared for what happens when it actually does occur in your own life. I just thought that's such an interesting, scary, but interesting idea of getting practice for something so dark, you know. And here it's like she's about to get pushed over the cliff, but you really don't know where it ends. Like maybe it's like right there and she's actually okay, but she just gets this sensation, or maybe she is about to actually fall to her death and this is her time, but it's all a mystery. So, yeah.
How did you make the sky? It's so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. It's watercolor, and I have this iridescent. I have this paint that one of my professors from graduate school pointed me to called Nova Color. It's this brand that's amazing. And they sell this pearlescent gold thing that I can't let go of. If you really like water it down, it just becomes this beautiful wash of just like gold glitter like all over everything. And I just felt like it just made the sky seem so, like the sun was like almost like shining through or something, even though it looks like it's kind of ominous and dark and crazy looking.
It almost looks like it's moving too.
Yeah.
It looks like the sky's opening
That's
for a bad
awesome.
storm,
Yeah.
or the sunlight's coming through.
Yeah, depending on where you're standing, or like the way that things kind of flicker and reflect. I just like how things actually kind of become activated, like, you know, because 2D art, you know, doesn't tend to move, obviously. So like it just kind of gives it another level of like coming to life. You know?
That brings up another question. So when you were working on this work, or earlier work, you know, were you like just like glitter, or was there like were you like little apprehension? Was there some apprehension about going down that route?
Yes, for sure.
Because it's not a material that is often looked at with a ton of respect in the
No,
professional art.
it's kitschy and like crafty and
Sure.
childish, and maybe even sometimes, unfortunately, it can become kind of sexist, like it's a girly thing to use. There was a gentleman, actually, I won't name his name, but he was also using glitter in his work. I show that previous to mine at a different space. And when I was talking about, I call it glitter, of course, and the gallery owner was like, "Oh my God, it's so refreshing to hear you say that," because the other guy was calling it metal flakes. Like, he couldn't bring himself to say glitter, and I was like, "It's fine, it's fine." So, for me, the metal flakes in the work, yeah, it's so manly.
Yeah.
I found glitter to be amazing when I was actually making the show for the Brooklyn Museum, because I was creating all these really dense spaces that were supposed to be looking like dirt, and like in like the boat and everything like that,
Like
and
in
the ground.
whatever
Yeah,
that is,
yeah,
stars. It
exactly.
has amazing dirt. I love the dirt.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, and on the loose paper pieces, it almost like carries a different sense of like weight, because like the paper kind of buckles a little bit and things like that. But I found when I was like sectioning off those areas, and I was like flicking the paint on, I needed it to be activated the same way that dirt does. Like dirt has its own little like minerals and stones in it that have reflective qualities, and I looked to like my makeup, and I had a little pot that had this loose glitter in it, and I went nuts. I like took some and then like I sprinkled it over the dirt, and like it didn't go all over it, but like the little parts that actually like caught it and dried, and then when I like flaked it off, it was like perfect. Like you walk past it and it looked like light was trying to come through, and then like it like emulated the rock in the dirt and everything, and I was just like, there it is. So like I've been using it since.
And we understand that Devin loves the glitter.
It is all over our house. Like it's on him before he leaves the house. Like it's become a little bit of a nuisance. I'm sorry. But yeah.
I actually look forward to vacuuming, so.
Yeah, you should see the vacuum bag. It's just like all glitter. I can reuse it maybe.
It's actually made its way bi-coastal, because when she sends me anything in the mail, there's always it's way into my department.
Well, we're pretty much wrapping up. So yeah, let's turn it to the audience and if there's any questions. General. Yeah.
There's a lot of female characters in the work. How much does like the sacred feminine or the goddess or the female oracle, how much are you inspired by that?
So much, but it's in this strange way in that like I'm thinking of myself as the female goddess and like the female oracle and all these sorts of things. And to be honest, like in the research that I've done, I've actually stumbled upon a lot more male gods and you know, mythological beasts and creatures and things. But in the work, I love it when, you know, of course it's always self-portraiture, as I said, but like I want it to be more open when the portrait literally goes away. And I want it to be that, you know, there's a lot of power in the female form and like mind and all that. So, but I don't ever want the work to be gender specific at the same time. So it's kind of like a strange place because I'm speaking from a personal place where I happen to be a woman making the work, but it's not from like, it's not about being a woman in that role per se. Did that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it more like a
more
balance of
universal
gender?
experience.
Yes, a more universal experience, but it just happens to be that I like the encasing for that character is female, but like it doesn't have to do with the female experience. Yeah. I'll go. Me? Yeah.
Oh, do you know what you're gonna do next? Are you gonna stick with this theme, or are you gonna explore something different?
That is such a good question. I don't know because I feel like I'm not done yet because I've enjoyed using the words so much lately because it's been such a great challenge. It's actually opened me up quite a bit. But maybe I need to tweak the challenge. But I don't know. The theme has been so long running that you could go both ways. Like maybe it's run its course or maybe I'm just not done yet. I just feel like when I keep having such like a flood of things coming over me with like imagery and idea concerning it, that I think that just means I'm not done yet. Because I would be like denying myself like, you know, getting it out and creating more things based on it. But I think I'm not done yet. I want to keep going. And then if I find that I'm making the back work again, then I'll stop and then switch gears. Yeah.
I really liked your concept behind a Soothsayer.
Oh.
And it's funny because I think earlier you said you weren't a good writer, but I'm a big fan of your titles. And
Thanks.
I was wondering if you could explain my favorite chrysanthemum trance.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to? Yeah, sure. We can bring it here.
Thanks.
We'll bring it here and then I can
Great.
start. Yeah, the titles are a really big deal for me. In fact, I changed one while the show has been up because I woke up with a epiphany where I was like, it's totally wrong. It's not the right title, and I found that it's the higher thought piece. It was actually Carry On before, and then I changed it to Higher Thought. So I take them really seriously. But I like it when there's like a play on words, you know, like the Soothsayer. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, so this one is Chrysanthemum Trance. And actually, this is one of my favorite ones to talk about. There's a lot of good, meaty stuff in there, but like I said, when I discovered the Ouroboros, the Greek mythological creature, the snake that eats its own tail, and it resembles eternal rebirth and recreation, I always like deconstructing him and just putting him into play, like into different modes of like action. And so in this one, he's actually shedding his skin, and I thought that was also perfectly aligned with the idea of the Ouroboros, and that like there's recreation happening and like a starting of something new. But sort of keeping the self along the way, you know? And so this one, I hope you don't mind, I'm going to point it out, but this one in the scales it says the future. It's pretty subtle, but it says T-H-E and then F-U, da-da-da. And then I love the idea of when you think of like a snake's tongue, how it splits in two at the end, and I was like, I'm going to use that, like, you know, formally speaking, like if it splits in two, I could extend something out from that. And I immediately thought of like snake charming and how they're put into a trance and then to some sort of hypnosis. And then I thought, somehow I stumbled upon the chrysanthemum flower, and I found out that chris means golden in Greek, and thinking of like the sun and creation and positive thinking. And then in Japanese culture, they use the chrysanthemum flower as a major form of eye fixation for hypnosis and meditation. And I love the idea of the flowers swinging and then that kind of emulating what we always think of when we think of hypnosis, like a swinging clock. And then the pompon of the chrysanthemum flower, like hypnotizing her even deeper and putting her into a major trance. And in the floral healing world, it's believed that the chrysanthemum flower is used to help heal and soothe tired eyes. And so this idea of you living your life and going to the end and just being exhausted and having gone through that journey, and then maybe the flower is like soothing you even further in the trance. And so with the sticker that I cut out that basically just shifts, but it's like the same exact shape as the silhouette of the reclined figure, I loved how it felt so similar to the snake shedding its skin. So both of them are getting rid of like some layer of themselves or something. And she's very, it almost seems like she's like drunk with whatever's happening with her arm, like trying to like touch what's above her and like feeling, like getting in touch even closer with what's putting her into this trance. So I love it. Yeah.
It changes color.
And it changes color whenever you walk past any of the ones with any of the sticker.
Cool.
It's like they sometimes disappear, or they turn gold or yellow or fuchsia. And when we were leaving the gallery after the opening on Thursday night, the one behind you guys, the lights were off of the gallery, and we walked past, and it was like electric. It was like glowing, and I had never seen it do that before, because of course I just put it away in the studio, and then I walk away and I don't look at it like with the lights off, obviously. And it just was, it was still activated. It was so strange.
A lot of these, I mean, the work is awesome, but a lot of them are so cool when you turn off the lights.
It's weird. It's like it's like they glow in the dark or something, which is like perfect for me. It's like, I don't know, thinking of them as being alive or something. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, that one was exciting for me.
I love the switch. I love the switch up.
Yeah, I didn't get to continue that thought. It was like with the snake charmer, like it's like the snake, the beast actually becomes the charmer, and then the human becomes the beast that needs taming. So like I thought that was so cool, the idea of switching roles of what's happening. And the snake, you know, like we've said before, normally being like a dark, evil character, but in my work it's always meant to be a positive being that brings, like, you know, that's a protector in a way.
Do you ever see yourself as the non-human in the painting?
That's such a good question. Wow. Maybe I'm the bird sometimes, because I feel so closely like related to them, like physically. I know that sounds weird, but like I'm kind of like bulbous up top, and then I've got like little stick legs. I feel like I'm kind of like I feel very closely related to them. I feel like I'm very anxious all the time, so I just feel like I have similar energy to them. But we did grow up owning birds, and I felt a very strong, like I felt more comfortable with my birds than I did with human beings. And so like I just felt that meant something. And so maybe in the work I feel like I am the birds also. But as far as like the mythological creatures and things like that, I almost feel like they are my gods, like, you know, in a way. Like, so I don't dare say that I am one of them, but maybe they're one of their followers or something. And not in a I drink the Kool-Aid kind of way. Yeah.
More questions? Cool. Well,
One last question.
Yeah,
What are you
sure.
working on now? So you're here showing this exhibit.
Yeah.
I guess we haven't cooking.
Right. I have another deadline actually as soon as I get back from Seattle to meet for a group show in Atlanta. And again, my memory is so bad. I'm not remembering the name of the show or the gallery right now, but I constantly update my Facebook fan page with where it is I'm going and where the work's going. But I have a piece to make for that, and there's a couple other deadlines in the future that I know that they're out there. My memory's really bad. Sorry, but just in the studio trying to make new work for some upcoming stuff. But yeah, I'm constantly updating things on my website.
Follow you on Facebook.
Yes, please do. I'm always showing like pictures of the works in process and stuff like that, which is really cool. You can see them like halfway done or like just getting started. So.
How does it feel to know that you may not see the work ever again?
Well, that's a great question.
You know what? I think that's more a question that he's asking for himself. When I was packing up the show to come here, he was practically in tears about definitely a few of them. Because he's in a couple of them actually, and it's about very personal stuff. I'm not gonna lie, I get very emotional about it. It can make me very teary and like upset and like excited and stuff. But you know, I'm sad. I'm sad about it, but it makes me really happy at the same time. Like you just like these things like come at you. Why am I crying? keep it for yourself and like have this, I don't know, line of things that you've documented about your life, like just there for you for later to like remind you of like what it is that you've done and seen and said, and then the idea of it just going off into the world and that you very possibly probably aren't going to see it again, like is so weird. It's so weird. But the idea of someone else falling in love with it and it speaking to them so deeply and like, you know, them cherishing it as much as you do is like so amazing. It's so amazing. And I'm not gonna lie, like it's now become my livelihood. So like I have to take it very seriously and that I'm not gonna have that compromise what it is that I'm making. I'm gonna make it so that I'm gonna wanna keep it and that it's that good and that like someone else will wanna take it home with them too. But I hate it.
Cool. Well, Kymia and Nawabi.
Thank you. Thank you guys for coming today. I always like saying that. Thank you guys for coming today to this, and for those of you who made it to the opening on Thursday night, that means so much to me to have support. You know, we just sit in our studios and are lost for a while and like are total hermits, so it's finally really nice to be among others that actually have an appreciation for this sort of thing. And also, I have to thank Lauren and Emily for helping me with the production of the show from the beginning to the end, and Jon especially for having me aboard. You know, Abmeyer and Wood. It's been nothing but a positive experience so far, so I can't tell you how much that means to me.